Hey guys. Okay. So please don't forget your cameras before we get started. And well, today we're gonna be, we will be looking at the lectures part of the listening section. We started with the listening last class, and we said that there were two types of tasks, right? First thing, you were going to listen to the conversations part, which were casual conversations between a student and a campus worker about college life and problems that the student was having. And now we're going to be looking at the lectures. So here you will actually be listening to some lectures and then answering some questions. So let's take a look. Here, remember, you can have 3 or 4 lectures. It depends on the number of tasks. And each lecture will have 6 questions, all right? Now, before we take a look at this, do you guys know what a lecture is? Can anyone here tell me what a lecture is? Okay, so first of all, let's start by what a lecture is not. So a lecture is not translated as a lectura in Spanish, which is which is what it looks like, but it's not. So first of all, it's not something that you read. Okay, it's definitely not something that you read. It's not a reading passage. Instead, a lecture is like the explanation of a topic, but it's spoken. Okay, so right now, for example, what I'm doing right now could count as a lecture. So I'm giving you guys a lecture on the listening section. So it's like a class, it's the explanation of a topic. In this case, you will only have academic lectures. So everything will be on academic content, the type of class that you would normally have in college. Okay, so it's like a college class. You will have a professor speaking. So a professor is like a teacher, but a college teacher. Okay, so it's a college professor giving a lecture on an academic topic. So that's what you guys will be listening to, and then obviously answering questions aloud. Now, if you ask me, I would say that the most important part in order to do well in this specific part of the test is obviously understanding the lecture, but also understanding the structure of the lecture and taking good notes. That's the most important part. If you guys have good notes, if you are able to take notes and understand at the same time, which is an ability that requires a lot of practice, then you're gonna be okay here. Otherwise, it will be hard for you. So my advice, try to practice as much as you can listening to these types of academic lectures. You can go online. You don't necessarily have to practice with like TOEFL practice sets, but you can practice with anything that's a lecture. So you can go online, search in YouTube. You'll find a lot of TED Talks, on academic topics, and that's okay. So just try to choose something that's academic and practice taking notes at the same time that you listen and trying to catch the idea as well. And then you'll be fine. So, okay. Now, in terms of the, going back to the test, here's how the structure of this lecture will be. So at the beginning, you will have a short introduction in which the professor is going to introduce the topic and maybe explain a bit of what the topic will be and how the lecture will be organized. So for example, if the lecture is on nuclear power, maybe the professor will start the class and be like, hey, today we're going to be looking at nuclear power, maybe define what nuclear power is. So maybe the professor will be like, okay, nuclear power is this and this and that, and it's used in this and this in those situations. And then the professor will very likely tell you how it's going to be organized. So the professor is going to narrow this topic down into something a bit more specific. So maybe the professor could focus on the types of nuclear power, or the uses of nuclear power, or maybe the advantages or disadvantages of nuclear power. Or maybe the professor is in favor of this type of energy and is trying to convince you guys of that. So that's what you will have in the introduction. You will have what the topic is, maybe a definition, an example, probably explanation, and then that part where the professor tells you what the lecture will focus on, because it's not something so broad, like everything about nuclear power. It's usually something a bit more specific. Okay, so that's what you will have first, and then you will focus on that specific thing, or that topic, that subtopic that the professor will focus on. So this topic will be broken down into different details. Maybe you have, as I was saying, facts, examples, opinions, theories, studies, experiments, research, concepts, many different details that you can have in the lecture. And unfortunately, most of your questions, if not all of them, are going to be detailed here. So all of the questions are going to be like asking you for those details that you need to take notes on. So maybe it's going to be like, okay, so who discovered how nuclear power works? Or in what date was this first seen? Or what is one disadvantage of nuclear power? So everything will be detailed. Okay, which means that your notes are going to be key here, because I'm sure you guys won't remember those details. So you need to try to take notes, but also understand at the same time. So yes, that's kind of how the structure will be. Another thing, sometimes you will have a lecture where the professor is alone. It's a single speaker lecture. The professor is talking about the topic and there are no students in the class. Or sometimes you could have a lecture, a more dynamic lecture, where the professor and the students are there, and the students are also involved in the lecture. So the professor can ask some questions, the students answer, maybe they add something, but they are there as well. So you can have one of the two. My advice, in case you have the students there as well, participating in the lecture, make sure that you identify who says what. Okay, so whenever one student says something, maybe you can take notes on that as well, and in parentheses write down an S for a student. Okay, so this is what the student said, so that you don't get mixed up, because the students may or may not be right about things, and that can be confusing when you have a question in there. So that's one thing I could say. So yep. I don't know if you guys have some questions so far. Okay. Now, as I was telling you, understanding the structure of the lecture, knowing what type of lecture it is, how it's organized, is going to help you take better notes and then answering the questions. So let me show you something. So generally speaking, there are 3 different types of lectures that you can have. Okay, so you can have either an expository or an explanatory type of lecture, an argumentative type of lecture, which is not that common, but it happens, or a historical lecture. Okay, so when you have one of these, an explanatory type of lecture, the professor has no opinion on the topic. So the professor is not biased, not at all, and it's just the professor just explaining a topic. Like what I was saying, right? Maybe if it's on nuclear power, the professor will give you an overview of what nuclear power is, how it works, when it was discovered, the uses, the advantages or disadvantages. So the professor is just explaining the topic to you guys without telling you anything. So it's very common to have one of those. Sometimes you have an argumentative type of lecture where the professor actually has an opinion and the professor is trying to convince the students of something. So maybe the professor is in favor of nuclear power. Maybe the professor, I don't know, the professor is trying to support the idea of replacing, I don't know, renewable sources of energy with nuclear energy, maybe. So in that case, the professor actually has a point of view, and it's very likely that you have reasons. So the professor will give you reasons supporting that idea. So we'll be like, okay, nuclear power is the best thing for these reasons. First, it's cheaper. Second, it's more efficient. Third, it's better for the environment, whatever. So you will have different reasons supporting that idea. And finally, you could also have a historical note. And it could be like maybe a biography, maybe something on history, like Second World War. So in those cases, everything will be about the chronological order of things, right? So everything's about time. You have different events. You need to pay attention to the order of events, the sequence of events, what happened first, what happened next. You will have a lot of dates, numbers, names, probably. So those are the most common types of lectures that you can have. And understanding what it is about will help you too. Okay, so for example, if you know it's an argumentative lecture, then you know that you're gonna be expecting reasons, so evidence supporting something. So when you're taking your notes, you're gonna be, okay, reason one, it's cheaper. Probably you will have more details. You will have like an example of why it's cheaper. So you will have maybe the name of this nuclear center. So you're going to be looking for those reasons and expecting them. If you know it's a historical note, then you can even maybe draw a timeline, right? So you can draw a timeline and be like, okay, so Sylvia Plath was born here in 1905, and she had two brothers, I don't know, two siblings. So and try to understand what type of lecture it is. And one more thing, there also within an explanatory or each type, you can have different types of lectures as well. So for example, you can have a classification. Maybe you have types of nuclear energy. Maybe you can have a contrast or a comparison, maybe capitalism versus communism. So when you have that contrast, you're going to be looking for the similarities and the differences. You can try to do bullet points for each one, okay? Or maybe a chart, similarities and differences, capitalism, communism. You can also have something like problem and solution, right? That's common when you have an argumentative text. So maybe the professor is trying to say that the best solution to climate change is nuclear energy. So you have problem and solution. So theory and support, or theory and evidence. Charles Darwin theory of evolution and evidence supporting that theory. Or cause and effect. The effects of pollution, or the effects of I don't know, like an economic phenomenon. So try to understand what type of lecture it is, and that will help you big time when taking notes. Okay, guys? So any questions so far now? I know that I can't really go over each one and give you better examples because we don't have that much time. But my advice, I will send you this and try to check out some examples for each one. So you can look, okay, compare and contrast type of lecture. And that's gonna give you a better idea of what it's about. You can try to take notes based on the type of lecture and do this your own, okay? So any questions now? Okay. Another thing, sorry, that I wanted to say, pay attention to transition words or phrases because they will help you. They will be like red flags for you. So they will also help you understand that structure that I'm telling you about. So if you have like the word similarly, you know it's probably a comparison, and you're looking at the similarities of things. If you have therefore, it's cause and effect, right? So this is the reason of that, something else. If you have in contrast, then you have opposing ideas. Or so it's important that you guys check these transitions out, that you know how to use them, that you know how they're used, and that you try to identify them when you are listening to the lecture. They could be the formal ones, maybe a bit more informal, more casual, maybe like, let's move on to, so even though it's not like furthermore, it's still a transition. So they will help you understand the structure. Pay attention to the way that the professor speaks as well. If the professor is like raising his voice somewhere or kind of repeating something too much, you can highlight it, circle it, because it's probably important. Or if the professor asks a question, for example, that's something that I've seen a lot. Every time the professor asks a question, it is very likely that you'll have the same question in your questions. So you better take notes on what the question is, the answer, and all those details. You know, it's hard to tell you all, but basically anything that you would normally not remember, like maybe if you have a definition, that's very common to have definitions of things. Like, so what is nuclear power? So you'll have it there. Names, numbers, studies, all of those key points or key details that you can be asked about. Okay, so take notes on all of them. Remember that most of your questions will be detailed. What else could I say? The tips are the same. I'm not going to go over them again. Remember to be extra careful in the listening section. Yeah, another thing, when you're taking notes, when you're practicing, try to practice in the most realistic scenarios it could be. So ask yourself, am I going to take the test in a test center? If the answer is yeah, then take notes the way that you would do it in a test center. So grab a piece of paper and a pen, right? Now, if you're taking it at home, which, well, that's another thing. But if you're taking it at home, then take notes on a plastic sheet, right? The way that you would do it in the actual test, or in a whiteboard, depends on what you're going to be going for. But practice in a realistic scenario. Don't type your notes, you know, because that's not how you're going to do it. So that's another thing, practice, and that goes for everything, you know, in the speaking, try to practice realistically. In the reading as well, set your timer. So don't just practice like in an ideal scenario that's not going to be realistic. Okay. One more thing, make sure that you only answer the questions based on the information that you had in the listening. Believe it or not, that's something that some people do. They are like, maybe you know about the topic, maybe you know about energy and you know how nuclear energy works, you know everything about it, but they're not asked, they don't require you to have that knowledge. So if a question is like, what's nuclear power? And you know the definition yourself, you don't have to answer based on that definition, right? You have to answer based on what you had in the lecture. So that could be tricky sometimes if you know about the topic. Make sure that everything you're answering is based on the information that you heard in the lecture. Okay. So yeah, those are some things I could say. Make your notes as visual as they could be. So if you have like a classification of something, you can draw some arrows. So you're like, okay, pollution. So 3 types, type 1, type 2, type 3, whatever. If you have definitions, you can draw like a equal sign. If you have, I don't know, 2 contrasting ideas, maybe you can do like 1 arrow like that. Or if you have like something that's increasing, you can draw an arrow up. So, or the same for decreasing. So make it as visual as it can be. That helps to save time. What else? If it's a biography, historical note, you can draw your timeline to help you organize it better. So make it organized, make it visual. Try to use the right amount of space. So that's it, you guys. I don't know if you have questions now, comments, anything. You don't?
Miss, everything was clear.
That's good. So let's practice now. We're gonna listen to a lecture. We're gonna answer the questions, of course, but we will also be looking at taking notes. So what we'll do, okay. So we will listen to this lecture about facial recognition. It's here. And we are all gonna take notes. I'm gonna take notes as well. And then we'll take a picture of our notes and send it to the WhatsApp chat. Okay, so that we can try to take a look at them, how you guys are doing. Maybe I can give you some feedback on your notes, and then we'll answer the questions. Okay, so I'm gonna play the lecture now. Please take some notes. Try to understand that. Try to understand what the lecture is about, how it's organized, and obviously the details. So let's see.
Hello, class. So today we're going to be looking at facial recognition and to the different sorts of technology that go into facial recognition. Now, before we start, can any of you tell me where we can see facial recognition in action? Yes, you at the back?
In the TV show Las Vegas?
Well, you're right. In this popular TV show, the security team pull images of the individuals from their surveillance system and run the image through a database to identify the person. In that way, all the card counters and blacklisted gamblers can be escorted from the poker tables. It looks easy on TV, but in the real world, facial recognition is a tricky business. So let's start with the more traditional methods of facial recognition. Every face has peaks and valleys, and these can be translated into what is termed as nodal points. Each face has about 80 of these, and they include distance between the eyes, the length of the jaw, the width of the nose, things like that. These measurements can be used to create a numerical code, and this is called a face print. This system is good because it can compare two-dimensional images such as photographs. The problem is that images have to be controlled. The person has to be staring straight at the camera. There must be no variance in facial expression or lighting because any variance in these parameters reduces the effectiveness of the system. So they had to come up with another way. So the new way of recognizing faces is by using a 3D model. It has better accuracy allegedly. 3D imagery detects distinctive features in the face such as the curves of the eyes, nose, and chin, features which do not change over time. These are measured at the sub-millimeter level. Interestingly, a 3D image can be taken not only from a live scan, but also from a 2D photograph. And another good thing about the 3D system is that it can recognize a person from a range of angles. The person doesn't have to be directly facing the camera as in 2D technology. Once again, the system gives each individual a unique code, a set of numbers that represents the face. It's easy to match a 3D image to another 3D image if you already have a 3D image in your database. It's less easy to match 3D images to 2D images, But what they can do is pull certain measurements from the 3D image, such as the eye and so forth, and use this to convert the 3D image into a 2D image, and this image can be more easily compared to the 2D images in the database. But it's not just the measurements which can be used to recognize faces. There's also a new development called skin biometrics. This uses the uniqueness of skin texture to get its results. The process takes a picture of a patch of skin, and the system will then identify any pores, lines, moles, blemishes, and other features of skin texture. This method can be used to identify identical twins, something that cannot be done with the 3D technology. Its other advantages over 3D imagery are that it's insensitive to changes in expression, blinking, smiling, and so forth, and can compensate for changes in facial features, such as the growth of a beard or wearing glasses. It's not perfect, though, as it is sensitive to lighting conditions and poor camera resolution, and if there is glare from the sun. So, now we've covered the main types of facial recognition, we'll move on to its uses. Now, has anybody here... Hello?
Okay. So then that was the lecture. What would you guys say? What do you think of the lecture? How was it?
It was hard.
Say? Okay. Why? What was the hard part?
Well, like really in my case, like there were some terms that I couldn't understand. Well, this is more related with the vocabulary that this professor managed.
Okay. So vocabulary, yeah. And that's a bit unpredictable because we don't really know what the topic will be. So yes. In general, some academic vocabulary, but yeah, we could not know. But also, if there are some words you don't get, that's fine. You know what? That's another thing. Another thing I didn't say. So, like if you miss a word or if you don't know what a word means, take notes either way. So take notes on however you think it's spelled, because sometimes you can even answer your questions without understanding what the question is about or what the question is really asking. Because if you see, like, I don't know, if you have two words related, let's say I don't know, maybe, okay, let's go with the same example of nuclear energy. So you have energy and then generation, and then in your question you have something that says energy, and then in the options you have one of the options that says generation. So you don't know if it's going to be the right one, but it could be, because if your two words go together in your notes and you identify the words in the question and in the options, you don't know what they mean or how they are connected, you know that they go together. So they could be a question and answer. You know what I mean? So take notes of everything you can hear, even if you are not necessarily familiar with the word. So yeah, sometimes it can be useful. What else? What else would you guys say? What else was hard about the lecture? Okay. And honestly, this wasn't such a hard one. Like from what I've seen some other lectures, like for example, here in this website, which I'll send the link to, you had like in the first one was a biography, and it was just so much information, so many details, so many dates and names. It was just hard to keep up. And there are others as well. They could be other topics. So little by little, step by step, you should try to practice, taking notes, listening, and then answering questions, and you'll get used. Okay. So now please take a picture of your notes, send it through the WhatsApp group, and then we'll take a look at them. I'll also send you mine. Okay, guys, please don't forget to send them. I already sent mine. Please send yours. And got one. And another one. Okay, so, okay, in the meantime, while you send them, let's talk about, before we take a look at the notes, let's talk about what the lecture was about and how it was organized. So can anyone tell me what it was about, how the professor organized the information, what exactly you saw about facial recognition? Anyone? Maybe Jimena, what do you think the lecture was about and how was it organized? What information about facial recognition does the professor cover here? Or maybe Natalia?
Teacher, I didn't hear well because I was in the bus and there was noises and I can understand all the lecture. Sorry.
Okay, Natalia, that's fine. Then maybe Fabiola, what about you? What could you say?
Teacher, actually I was having some trouble with my connection. So I hear little parts that um, I couldn't listen everything good.
Okay, but from what you have, what do you?
Talking about some biometrics, I hear something about become like skin biometrics and something about 2D, 3D.
Okay, that's right.
I think it's, I don't know how to explain.
Okay. So, well, was anybody able to listen to the entire lecture and could explain?
From what I could listen, the professor talked about facial recognition and he asked for an example to his students, and some students mentioned about a TV show in Las Vegas, and then after that example, the professor mentioned that facial recognition was tricky, and this is based on giving a numerical code to a face. and it may be affected by the light exposed of the sun, and then he also provide like um, I don't know, like some ways to take that are used for facial recognition, that it is a 3D model and the biometric skin biometrics.
Okay, perfect, Madeline. Thank you so much. So there you go. So yes, you were very detailed. It is about facial recognition. They started with a definition of what it is, how it works, an example as well, given by one of the students. And then they classify, we talk about the types of facial recognition or the types of technology that's used. They talk about the 2D, 3D, and skin bio. And if I'm not wrong, they also explain how each one is used and their advantages and disadvantages, or the problems that each one has. So, okay, guys. So let's take a look at your notes, and then I'll show you mine. So, all right, this one here is, okay, so you have a reasonable amount of information, I would say. I'm not able to distinguish too much. Okay, you have something about the example at the beginning, the TV show. One thing I like is I think you are able to find that classification, right? Because you have like two different categories for 3D model, a skin biometric. You have bullet points for each one, okay? The things that they can do and the things that they cannot do. I would try maybe to have a bit more information because they did have a lot of details in there. But I think it's complete. Okay. I also take a look at this one here. So, all right. Okay, perfect. I like that you have like 3 icons there. So I guess the first one is the 2D model, then you have the 3D model and the skin biometric one. You have some information there. You'll have to be in front of the camera, can transform 3D to 2D, direct course in the face, identical twins, poor camera resolution. Okay, I love this one. I think it covers the most important info. You have like one thing that they can or can't do, can transport, don't have to be in front of the camera. That's great. I really like this one. It's very organized. And here we have another one. Okay, this is great as well. I like that it's very visual. So you have the example, and then you have the traditional method, good, the 2D one, an explanation, the 3D, and the skin biometric. I really like this one, the bullet points as well. Identical. Okay, that's perfect. So I like the fact that you were able to classify that information and separate it in your paper. And finally, here's mine. You don't have to do it this way. You could organize it in the way that, for example, the last person did, as long as you make that distinction, right, between 2D, 3D, and skin biometric. Maybe I would have liked to see also the distinction between advantages and problems to make it easier for you guys to look for each part. But most of you guys covered that part as well. So you can see that's what I have. Something here at the beginning for the topic, the example, then the 3 types, and then I made like another distinction, right? Happy and sad face stickers for the advantages and disadvantages of each type. So let's see how we can answer the questions using that information we have. Okay. So the first question goes, where does the TV show Las Vegas take place? Is it in a shopping mall, in a police department, or in a casino, or in a crime line? What would you guys say?
Letter C.
Letter C, in a casino, okay. Do you all agree?
Yes.
Okay, that's perfect. It's about the example. Awesome. So I do remember they talk about gamblers, poker tables. So yeah, it's gotta be a casino. Now here we have a definition. So what is a face print? Something that's mentioned at the beginning. Take a look at your notes, maybe.
I think it's a
Okay, code which identifies face. Do you guys agree?
Maybe I would choose C, a 2D image of the face.
Face. Anyone else? Valeria, what would you say?
well, I talked at the beginning. I was choosing the letter A.
Oh. So let's go for A. Let's see. Okay, that's perfect. A code which identifies a face. Awesome. So I do remember they say that I think D, the number of nodal points, is translated into a code, and the code is a face. Now, a 2D image of the face is just like a picture, a photograph, a drawing, maybe. So perfect. A code which identifies a face. It makes a lot of sense. And remember, anytime you have a definition, take notes. Now, question 3 says, identify 2 problems with 2D facial recognition. So look at your notes, maybe, or if you remember, and try to go to the 2D part of your notes. So what are 2 problems with this technology?
Letter B, the person in the photograph must face the camera.
Okay, and the other one? What's the other problem?
Probably letter A because the professor mentions that about the lighting.
Okay, let's see. That's perfect. It's not effective. Picture is dark lighting, and the person must face the camera. Good. Now, I remember somebody had in their notes in the 3D part, they had don't have to be facing the camera. And that was an advantage of the 3D one, right? So you can also use that, not necessarily what you have in the 2D one. But if you understand the overall idea of this lecture, you know that, okay, there are 3 types. And I think that every type is like an improvement of the previous one. So the 2D technology has had some problems, and because they were trying to solve those problems, they created a 3D technology. And then the skin biometric is like an improvement of the 3D one. So if you know that one of the advantages of 3D technology is that you don't have to face the camera, then it's probably because the 2D had a problem with that. So in the 2D, you had to face the camera. So also understanding, making it logical helps. Or like, for example, D, if you know that nodal points, the number of nodal points is translated into a code that is a face print, you know that nodal points can be measured. So it couldn't be D as well. So that helps. Now 4, we have, what is the problem with the 3D technology? So look at your notes. What do you?
Letter C, it's impossible to match a 3D image to a 2D image.
Yeah, do you agree?
Yes.
Okay. See, well, not exactly. They,
It's D. It cannot distinguish between identical twins.
perfect. And the same thing here. I remember somebody had in their notes, I don't know who this was, but somebody had in their notes when they were in the skin biometric part, in the skin biometric category, they had it can distinguish between identical twins. So again, right, if that's an advantage of skin biometric technology, then it must be a problem of 3D technology. So it's a tricky part because I do remember that they also talk a lot about matching 3D to 2D, but I'm not sure if it's entirely impossible. I think that you need to kind of convert the image and do a lot of different tricks in order to match these two types of images, but you can do it at the end of the day. So that's, yeah, that's another. Now we have 3, which 2 elements below can be measured by skin biometric technology. So what can the skin biometric technology do? Let's see.
Option B.
What would you guys say?
Maybe option B, picture someone's skin.
Option D. I'm sorry, come again. You said D, the distance between the eyes?
B.
B,
Option
okay.
B.
All right, B, and the other one?
Option C.
C, okay. Do you guys agree? Okay, guys. So that's right. That's perfect. The texture and existence of lines. And that's another way, to be logical, because if you have an idea of what each one was about in general, overall, you know that the 2D was more about the shape of your face, right? Like, and that there you go, like shapes, measurements, curves, the size of your nose, the distance between the eyes, the line of the jaw. And then the 3D technology was about angles. So I think it took like different images from different angles. So that's why you don't have to be facing the camera. And then the skin biometric technology is all about the skin, right? So it's about the texture of your skin. I think they take like a patch of your skin and analyze it, and they look for lines and moles and pores. So it's all about the skin. So yes. And finally, the last one, which of these faces will the skin biometric system be unable to identify? So what do you think?
maybe option D, because she has she has
Okay,
sunglasses.
glasses. Okay. Do you guys agree?
I will choose A. The lecturer mentioned that that method has some troubles identifying photos with poor resolution.
Right. So let's try both. Let's try A first. So you was saying. So yeah, it's about the resolution, the lighting, maybe. I think that even though in D you have, I mean, she has the glasses on, but you still appreciate the skin, right? Like we said, the texture of the skin and lines on the face. So you still look at that. And the same goes for the others. The only one in which you're not really able to look at the texture of the skin is A. So that's it, you guys. As you can see, most of the questions, all of them are detailed. It's important to understand the structure so that you can look for the answers easily. And yep, I don't know if you guys have some questions before we go. Okay, then I'm sending you guys the survey. Today we need to do 2. So I just sent the first one. Please fill it out and then I'll send the second one. Okay. Thank you. So I'm sending the second one now. And I'll see you guys next class. You have a nice evening.
Thank you, Miss.
Teacher.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys.